1 billion ton emissions cut. Why it's a big leap forward. This is the first time that India has taken any climate target in terms of its absolute emissions. While this marks a significant step of India's existing climate targets, the five promises made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi are relatively low hanging fruit, with at least one in response to global pressure. The most substantive new commitment, however, relates to the 1 billion ton reduction in its total projected emissions from now until 2030. This is the first time that India has taken any climate target in terms of its absolute emissions. Though it's not a direct emission reduction target, something that only developed countries are expected to take, the reduction marks a major step towards bending India's emission trajectory. According to the World Resources Institute, India's total greenhouse gas emissions were about 3.3 billion tons in 2018. It's projected to rise above 4 billion tons per year by 2030. That would mean now and 2030, India could be emitting anywhere between 35 to 40 billion tons at the current rates of growth. Cutting 1 billion tons would therefore represent a reduction of 2.5 to 3% in its absolute emission in the business as usual scenario in the next 9 years. This was also the most unexpected of the five new announcements. The most anticipated promise was about setting a net zero target, something that the world had been demanding of India for long. Net zero is a state in which a country's total emissions are offset by absorptions of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, like that done by trees and forests, and physical removal of carbon dioxide through futuristic technologies. More than 70 countries have promised to become net zero by the middle of the century, and this is being considered vital for meeting the Paris Agreement goal of keeping global temperatures within 2 degrees Celsius from pre industrial times. India's net zero target of 2070 silences its critics, but it's also along expected lines. The big thing here is not the target itself, but the fact that India finally relented and decided to take up target, something it had been holding back on for quite some time. In its climate action plan submitted under the Paris Agreement, India had promised to reduce its emission intensity or emissions per unit of GDP by 33 to 35% by the year 2030 compared to 2005 levels. Even at that time, it was considered a modest target, something that could be achieved as a business as usual scenario. In fact, estimates suggest that India would achieve this target by 2022 itself, 8 years in advance. This increase of the target to 45% reduction is therefore in line with the progress made. The same is true with the increase in installed capacity of renewable energy and that of proportion of renewable sources in India's electricity generation. 2 years ago, Modi, speaking at a climate meeting on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, said that India would take up its installed capacity of renewable energy to 450 gigawatt by 2030. At the time, India's publicly stated target was 175 gigawatt by the year 2022. The installed renewable capacity has been growing rapidly in the last few years, and the enhancement from 450 gigawatt to 500 gigawatt is not likely to be very challenging. The increase in proportion of renewable energy sources in India, electricity generation to 50% is a natural corollary of this. Most of the new capacity additions in the energy sector are being done in the renewable and non fossil fuel space. In fact, India has already said that it does not plan to start any new coal power plants after 2022. As of now, India was already targeting 40% electricity production through non fossil fuel sources by 2030. Put together, this comprehensive package is much more than the world was expecting of India and marks a significant commitment to climate action. Reducing 1 billion tons of emission by 2030 and expanding non fossils capacity to 500 gigawatt are enormous and transformative steps. 50% electricity generation from renewable energy sources speaks of India's leadership and commitment to climate action, said Ajay Mathur, head of International Solar Alliance and a former climate negotiator for India. Arunbhava Ghosh, CEO of Council of Energy, Environment and Water, said that India had demonstrated climate leadership and now the ball was in the court of developed world to raise its ambition, particularly in matters of climate finance. This is real climate action. Now India demands US 1 trillion in climate finance as soon as possible and will monitor not just climate action but also climate finance, Ghosh said. Thank you.